Singer Ari Lennox recently stated that the show Martin was a colorist show because of the way that Martin would roast Pam. I'm your host, Cool Colas, and you are now tuning into a new video on my channel. So let's get into it. This is a pretty deep and complex topic because there's a lot of different things to dive into here and to unpack. So I'm going to try to unpack it as best as I can, but the idea is that I want to touch on a few different things that I noticed, both with what she stated and even looking at this from the outside perspective. All right, so let's cut straight into it. First of all, Ari Lennox stated that she believes that the show Martin is colorist because Martin was often roasting Pam. And I just want to let you all know and make it very clear that I do not agree with her whatsoever. I mean, let's think about it. Pam was snapped on, right? She was roasted. But at the same time, it wasn't because of the fact that her skin was dark. It was because of her beady beads, as Martin would always say. It was because of her attitude and all of these other things. So Martin was often snapping on Pam for those types of things. And really, to be honest with you, everybody snapped on everybody. I mean, Martin was snapping on his own woman, Gina, because he always talked about how she had a bobblehead, she had a big head, and all this other stuff about her as well, too. And then they was always talking about Tommy. You know, it was always, you ain't got no job, Tommy. You know, it was always that. You know, with Cole, it was always that he was stupid. So they always were all snapping on each other. And if we really look at all of the shades of these different characters, they were all over the board. As a matter of fact, Martin and Pam weren't that far in color from each other, if you really think about it. And to be clear, no one hated on Pam. As a matter of fact, I'm going to be honest. Most of us dudes thought that Pam was fine as hell. And I'll even tell you, just from my own perspective, I thought that Pam was finer than Gina, to be real. You know, look at all that wagon she was dragging. She had a whole bunch of booty, so I was definitely all on Pam. And also, let's just not forget the actress Tichina Arnold. This is a woman who is on code and is very pro-black. This is a woman who has linked with Rizza Islam. This is somebody who has spoke up about black empowerment. This is somebody who has put on for people such as Jason Black and also Professor Black Truth and the things that they've actually stated. So this is a rarity because a lot of times you don't get a lot of these celebrities who actually put on for new black media, but Tichina Arnold has actually done that. And I bring that point up to basically say that if Tichina Arnold felt that she was being mistreated in a way racially, then I have no doubts that she would have spoken up about it at this point. I also want to emphasize on the show, the roasting was playful because even when they had serious moments, you saw a lot of them come together. Like, I'll give you an example. There were times where Martin and Pam would team up. Like, for example, when Gina had her friend who was, you know, doing the most, like she wasn't really feeling Martin and she also was being disrespectful to Pam. The two of them teamed up and they came together basically, you know, on some, well, you know, I can talk about BDB, but you can't talk about her. I don't remember if that's what he said exactly, but my point is that there were times where they even teamed up because there was a level of respect still there. So even with the snapping and the back and forth and the roasting and all that, that was all out of being playful. Point with all that is that it really wasn't about colorism or anything like that. It was about the chemistry that they had. And really it's just embedded into our DNA as foundational black Americans. As a matter of fact, if you look at a lot of other black sitcoms, this was a common trend. So let's take a look at a few where this actually existed and nobody's making any noise about it. You had Sanford and Son, where Fred had clowned Esther all the time. You had the Jeffersons, where you had George Jefferson, and he was always clowning Florence, who, by the way, was light-skinned, if I remember correctly. You had Good Times, where JJ would always snap on Thelma, and Thelma was fine as hell, let's be real, especially during that time period. And she would snap back. You know, you had Fresh Prince, where, and I'm just going to take this away from, you know, just looking at black man snapping on a black woman. I mean, look at Will. I mean, he would snap on his whole damn family. I mean, he snapped on Uncle Phil. He snapped on Jeffrey. He snapped on Carlton. I mean, literally everybody that he could find, he would be talking mad shit about. And I mean, if we're talking about colorism, is Will not lighter than Carlton? And then also on Living Single, you had the character Max, and then you also had the character Kyle. And the two of them, when they were roasting each other and whatnot, it was clear that there was some heavy sexual tension between these two. They were roasting each other because they really liked each other, and there was an undercurrent of them wanting to tear each other apart. So let's be real, when we say that a lot of this roasting was based in playfulness, but also respect and even likability. I also want to make it clear that this was not one-sided abuse. I mean, these women were not passive. These women were not victims. Pam was not a victim whatsoever. She would snap back on Martin. She'd always talk about how he had big ears and how he was short and all this other stuff. Think about it. You had Florence, who was literally snapping back on George Jefferson as well, too. You also had Aunt Esther, who was also roasting. And then you had Max, who was roasting Kyle back as well. And then, if you really think about all that, what this really shows you is that a lot of us as foundational Black American men actually find it attractive when our women are a little spicy and a little sassy, where they can kind of snap back and they can, keep up with us and say certain things. And I'm not saying like, they have to be just a total bitch. I'm not really saying all that. But what I'm saying is that we like the idea of the playfulness, the back and forth exchange. And for some of you all who are watching this and you're saying, that's not me, that's not me. Okay, that's not you, whatever. But I know that I do. And I know a lot of other dudes who feel the exact same way. And also, to be clear, roasting itself did not start from just looking at Black sitcoms on television. This is something that has been practiced for a long time in foundational Black American culture. They call it playing the dozens. And this is something that Brother Tariq Nasheed has talked about in multiple instances, and he has laid out perfectly. When we look at the whole playing the dozens concept, this has taught us emotional resilience and verbal agility. And it's also taught us about community as well, too. So it was never really about tearing each other down. It was about keeping us sharp and keeping us in check. Iron sharpens iron, as they always say, right? And although I do agree with Tariq Nasheed's breakdown of roasting, I do think that there needs to be some nuanced conversation around that topic, because there are different levels to it. And I want to make sure that there's an understanding of what's actually happening here. So I think there's 3 types of things that can happen that are under the heading of insults, because that's what this is actually underneath. So you got roasting, which we talked about, which is more so like playful, it's mutual, and it's something that is just where people have a shared love through jokes. Then you have what I would call straightening. Straightening is when you're basically getting to the root of a problem and you're talking about somebody and criticizing them for something that they've done. It's more so about accountability than anything. And then you have hating or bullying, which would be the last category. So this would be a thing of it's one-sided, it's harmful, it's constant torment. It's an isolated incident where there's either a group of people or a person who continuously attacks a specific person for the means of tearing them down instead of building them up. So these are all different things, and there's different levels to these things. Now, I do want to say that at some point, some of these things can kind of intertwine with one another, but these are different categories and different things that people experience. And obviously, there's different examples of where this can occur. Like, for example, roasting usually occurs when it's you and your boys and y'all all are like, just hanging out, and then you just, roasting each other, and then y'all laugh and y'all go get something to eat. Straightening is when, let's say I'm online, somebody is buck dancing, and I literally say, hey, you're Samboing right now. That's straightening right now, because what I'm doing is giving accountability for that action, and also giving other people an alert to say, hey, this person is shown to be Samboing right now, or what they did here, it was a very coonish thing. And then there's bullying, or there's hating, which basically is where you're literally doing something to tear people down. You're doing something to make somebody feel small and make somebody feel little. I say all this, and it's very important, because we as foundational Black Americans get into this idea of conflating all these things together when they are different. And the reason why it's important to notice, because we have a bad habit of basically saying that everybody is our friend. So when we assume that somebody gives the facade of roasting, that means that they are also trying to do something to lift us up. But there are a lot of people who are in our lives around us, and they do and they say things, and they don't mean good intent. They're there to tear you down, break you apart, and to harm you. And these are things that we need to be mindful of. We need to use discernment to be able to determine what is actually happening with the people who are around us. This is really how we got into this cultural disrespect to begin with. So this is something that's important to highlight. And of course, there are nuanced examples as well too. Like, for example, if you go into a black barbershop and they get to roast it, like, they're not saying that because they're trying to tear you down or trying to make you feel small. It's a thing of we're just snapping on each other because it's a part of our culture. As a matter of fact, those same barbers are going to make sure they do a great job to get you right and make you feel good and make you look good by the time you get up out of there. Because that's the whole idea of being a barber, or being somebody who is in that style industry, the beautification industry. They're there to make sure that you look good so that you feel good at the end of the day. Those are just little jokes that they do. It's a part of that culture. Now, here's where we need to bring all this back to Ari Lennox. I just want to make a few disclaimers before I say anything about her going forward. First of all, I'm not a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a therapist, or anybody who is professionally inclined to give advice from a psychological standpoint on how somebody is, what their triggers are, who they are, or what they went through. That is not my goal, and that is not what I am trying to do here. So that's the first thing I want to say. The second thing I want to say is Ari Lennox is a beautiful black woman. Let's be real. She is a very beautiful black woman, and most black men know that as well too. And I'm not just saying that from an aesthetic standpoint or just generally speaking, but this is a woman who I am actually attracted to. My point in saying all this is there's been a lot of talk from Ari Lennox herself where she said that a lot of people have criticized her for her image. And I can guarantee you that most black men who see Ari Lennox find her attractive. So as many people as she says are criticizing her for the way she looks, I guarantee you there are many other people who would feel the opposite about the way she looks. And this kind of flows into my next point, which is that I can tell that Ari Lennox is a very insecure woman for multiple reasons. I mean, she's publicly admitted that she feels undesirable, that she feels like she's regular. She's had an emotional Instagram breakdown because she was compared to a dog. You know, she's tweeted that she's not appreciated by people in the industry or her fans as well too. And I say all that to once again say Ari Lennox is beautiful and it's not up for debate. But she clearly struggles with seeing that within herself as well too. And sometimes with people who have this type of problem, it leaks into their own worldview. One thing that you have to understand about women in general is that a lot of them have a certain level of rebellion, and some rebel a lot more than others do. And a lot of that rebellion is experienced because a lot of times they believe that someone, generally someone who raises them, tries to put them into a box, and they don't like this. They don't like the idea of being criticized for something that they do or someone who they are. And as a result, they have a reactive response to being put in a box or being criticized or being told that they have to be this thing. So often they'll create these narratives because they're projecting from what has been created from that tension between being told that they have to be a certain way. And as a result, they rebel. But with Ari Lennox, she's been doing it so much and probably so long, it's actually turned into a reach that doesn't make sense, even to the point where other people who can kind of vibe with who she is to a certain extent are also feeling the same way. I mean, there's even this page that I follow on my personal Instagram where, you know, it's all about dark-skinned black women. And this page is generally supportive of everything that dark-skinned black women do. And they actually brought up the topic of what Ari Lennox said, and the comments and the way that they positioned the question was pretty polarizing. Usually they defend them the minute that they say anything happened, anything is up, anything is wrong, or whatever the case is. But in this case, they kind of presented it like, what are y'all's thoughts? And a lot of the comments are basically saying, you know, we don't really agree with Ari. The point is that Ari has positioned herself into a point where she's projecting her pain into a critique in order to sound very deep and what a lot of people would call woke. But it's more so emotional reactivity. And this happens when rebellion isn't really grounded in trying to heal properly. I hate using that word, but I think it's proper for this context. And it just ends up becoming a bunch of noise. And in this case, it's something that went semi-viral. My point in saying this is that this isn't really about Martin. This is about how she feels when she sees someone like Pam being clowned. I mean, even if Pam never saw herself as a victim, this is something that Ari Lennox herself is internalizing. Another part of this rebellion reach that I think that people need to understand too is that Ari kind of got she kind of rubbed a little shea butter in that head. I mean, let's be real. There's a little shea butter Sambaism going on as well too. I mean, if you look back at the history of the things that Ari Lennox has said and done, it shows how this rebellion goes a little bit deeper and more conceptual. You know, she clearly has an issue from what I see with a lot of black male figures, especially those who she believes is putting her in that box as I described earlier. Now, again, I want to make it clear. I do not know Ari Lennox. I do not know her history. I do not know her story. I do not know what she's been through. So I'm not going to pretend to. I'm just telling you the signs of what I see. Now, with that being said, she has criticized Kevin Samuels. You don't have to like the guy, but she did criticize him, and he's known for being controversial because of the fact that he was giving women accountability, or what he believed was accountability. She also talked about and criticized hoteps. And as you all know, a lot of these shea butter Sambas will use the term hotep to talk about a black man, usually who is pro-black, and talks about pro-black aspects as if it's a pejorative. And what's funny is she got her ass caught up in a little scheme where, you know, they were trying to, you know, be racist against her when she went international. So my thing is, well, you done isolated and disrespected all these so-called hoteps who would have gone miles and miles to make sure that they got you out of a jam. And a lot of times when it comes to shea butter Sambaism, what a lot of them are literally trying to do is make it so that black women can be shielded from the criticism, but they can still continue to criticize. You know, it's like selective pro-blackism. It's like when a lot of black women call themselves a pro-black woman. You know, it's used as advocacy, or it appears like advocacy, but it's really meant to tear down black men at their expense. And in some cases, it's done under the guise of being uplifting. And it has a level of hypocrisy to it. You know, they want to protect black women from all critique, but that same grace is not given to black men. Because I'll tell you one thing. I experienced colorism growing up myself. I mean, I'm a dark-skinned black man. Anybody can see that from looking at me. You know, I've been called everything from charcoal to saying I was darker than midnight and all types of stuff. My point in saying all that is, if I as a dark-skinned black man were to go back and say I was mistreated, people were talking badly about me because of the color of my skin, people would tell me to man up, not talk about it, you know, that would happen in whatever grade it happened in. I need to get over it, whatever the case may be. I'm not saying I'm dwelling on it. What I'm simply making the point is that I experienced that. And a lot of dark-skinned black men also experience that as well too. But we have been known to just be resilient. And I'm not saying that black women have to be the exact same way as us either. But my point is that there's a level of hypocrisy, because when the idea of colorism itself is talked about, it's only talked about because a black woman experienced it, when all of us in the black community have experienced it when we were younger. That's my point. I think this one-way street of criticism lacks integrity. I mean, you can't just be snappy and cute and sexual and empowered and all this other shit, and then when, you know, the jokes start flying, you want to cry colorism. It just doesn't work like that, especially when there aren't specific examples of colorism being enacted. My last message to Ari Lennox is this: baby girl, your insecurities are showing and it's starting to backfire. The reality is that you can't take colorism and try to make it seem like it's a system that's equivalent to racism or white supremacy, because it's not. And you can't reach for the stars in order to make it seem like it's a thing that is not. You may have missed the point. Again, none of this is disrespect to Ari Lennox. This is just some constructive criticism. When you take your personal pain and you mislabel it to try to turn it into a political critique, you end up attempting to rewrite history, but you don't actually end up moving past it. All right, y'all, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed what I had to say, and I'll definitely have more to come in the future, so make sure you stay tuned. In the meantime, I hope you like this video, subscribe, hit the share button, and also hit the bell icon so you get notifications for whenever I come out with new content on this channel. Other than that, I will talk to y'all later. Peace out, y'all.